From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I was going to write a creative intro tying mental health and Game of Thrones, but I know nothing about Game of Thrones, and in researching it, I decided it wasn't really worth it. So pause the podcast here and write your own intro. While you're at it, write one for next week, too. And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangerman. Time for some Pod Therapy.
So as we are recording this on a Sunday, the Game of Thrones finale is happening tonight.
I thought it already happened.
Oh, no. You'd think so, based on the 800,000 people who signed a petition asking HBO to redo the season.
Right.
Yeah, you'd assume that it had already been done.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
They're not messing around.
The only thing funnier. So SJ and I have watched all of the Game of Thrones, but we haven't watched any of this season.
Okay.
We haven't done this season at all yet because she was out of town for most of it.
Oh, wow. How have you avoided the spoilers?
Anytime I see anything that
You just
vaguely,
immediately.
I just scroll
Wow.
quickly.
Oh, wow.
But the only thing funnier than these people asking for HBO to redo the entire season is if HBO actually did it.
Did it? Yeah. Like,
If
yeah,
HBO
sure.
were like, fine,
Whatever.
you want to give us more money?
That's fine. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we
Season
could do
12, part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one universe. Now here's another one.
Yeah.
Is there ever, though, like a season
Hey, look,
finale?
it's Thanos.
Yeah. Is this working for you? You guys good with this?
Do it again? Fine.
No, they
Yeah,
should
that's fine.
do
We
something
try
like
again.
that. They should absolutely tie in some other character. Like, okay,
Everybody's
and then we'll have...
always pissed at series finales. though.
Exactly.
Remember when The
It-
Sopranos faded to black and everybody was like furious?
Yeah,
and Sex in the City.
Is
like,
there ever a
there's
season
always
finale?
unsatisfying.
Everybody's upset with that.
No,
I
it's
don't
just.
I thought
there's no
Seinfeld
good-
was one of the better ones.
when they did the recap in the courtroom thing.
Yeah,
it just,
they did the all the callbacks in the courtroom.
Yeah,
and then
just
they,
a clip show.
And then they
Yeah.
went to jail.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
They go to jail for a year, and
Yeah.
it's just a clip show. Yeah. But I liked
think
that because it's a show about nothing.
What-
What did you want it to be? Like him and Elaine get together? That's
You know
fine.
what? My
Just boned down.
my
It's just 30 minutes.
20-minute sex scene.
Wow. Well, I feel satisfied with that ending.
my all-time favorite ending series finale was MASH.
MASH.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was a good one.
That's a
I
fine
love
one.
that
Yeah.
You know, I didn't follow that show very closely.
Yeah.
I did see
Oh,
it
MASH is
occasionally.
great.
Yeah,
MASH
good
is
show.
a great show.
MASH is
Yeah.
MASH is a show that holds up too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could go back and watch that the whole series right now.
I've been
Yeah.
rewatching The Office a lot lately, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
been really enjoyable.
Well, next time you think, hey, I'm going to rewatch The Office
Try out
again.
MASH.
Try
Yeah.
MASH.
If
Yes.
I'm going to do a rewatch anyway, just go back to MASH.
Yeah.
I've seen episodes of MASH. I just never got very invested in the characters and knew much. I knew about the crossdresser guy, which I always thought was pretty cool,
Yeah.
especially for that like era, because that wasn't even the weirdest thing about him.
Right.
Like they were
Right.
good with that.
Yeah.
Like the show.
Well,
did
they
a
got
really
away
good-
with it because it was he wasn't actually a transvestite.
Oh, was he really?
No, he was trying to get kicked out of the military
Oh,
for psych reasons.
That's the bit.
That was the bit.
Oh,
And so everybody knew that's what he was trying to do. So they're just like, all right, go ahead.
yeah. It said no. You're not
Yeah.
leaving.
No, you're not
It's
leaving.
like Catch-22. You're
Yeah.
sorry and stuff. Like
Yeah.
okay.
But like societally, it got the show was able to get away with it because of that.
Right.
Because he's doing it to get punished.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so they're all like, yeah, you're nice try. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not going to bring this up. We don't care. That's really funny. So I'll have to watch that one too. But yeah,
You do.
yeah, people are writing in and trying to get the thing changed. And yeah, it's really funny. I'm good with it. It is, I'm a huge devotee of this. And apparently I'm the only one in the room that's caught up and knows the show. It's been hard to watch.
Really?
It's been hard to watch. But I also don't care because to
Why
me-
has it been hard to watch?
So the best.
Tell us, Jim.
I'll tell you.
Why has
Here's
it
the
been
answer.
hard?
Here's the answer. The best thing I've
Do you
seen.
need me for this? Can I leave?
Yeah, you can just head out. Jacob and I are just going to change the show. So the best thing I've seen to explain this was this meme that has like this horse and like it's perfectly drawn at like the beginning of the horse and then like it
best
turns
thing
into
I've
like
seen
this like
just
Daffy Duck cartoon horse at the end.
Uh-huh.
And they basically said season 1 through 4 of Game of Thrones is like this very perfectly well drawn like horse, and then the end is like this Daffy Duck head. So it's basically become like a cartoon of itself.
Right.
That's the
Okay.
thing. So it went from being like this very rich, well written, no rules, like reflecting real life and all the caveats of like complexity of real life to becoming like a Disney movie where it's like,
Well,
there's
did-
like a clear bad guy and a clear good guy, and then we sing songs.
At one point there was and I forget where the point is in the thing, but I mean, because he didn't write all of the books.
Yeah, he stopped. Yeah, he's never written the final one.
And so I mean, for the first however many seasons it was,
Right.
they were following along with the books and
Perfectly.
recreating these novels.
Yes.
And then at some point,
Right.
it goes to HBO writers with him as a consultant,
Right.
now creating the rest of this.
True Blood did the same thing.
So I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Yep, and in the beginning, True Blood was great, and then all of a sudden it turned into the cartoon, and it is what it is. So, yeah, I think that's a fair... A lot of people are pissed, so... But by the time people are hearing this, the finale will have already been out for several days.
Are we talking about True Blood now?
Yeah, and Seinfeld. Anyway, Seinfeld dies, and Snape killed Dumbledore. So all of this happens.
And MASH!
And MASH. And he is cross-dressing the whole time. So, yeah. So if you are part of those... It's funny because there's a lot of talk online about how there's going to be... And, you know, the intention of the story is to poke fun at it, but they're saying, like, there are therapists who are, like, going to react to this. Like, there's people that are, like, chit-chatting with therapists about it.
I did
And
see
I
that.
commented on that and said, actually, yes, in my private practice, Avengers Endgame and this season of Game of Thrones has been coming up, like, in session, and it's because people are deeply invested in a narrative, and they're emotionally affected by the show, which everybody teases that, and I've never thought that was, like, a good joke, because it's like, people spent multi-millions of dollars in artistry and production to elicit an emotion out of a person, and when they have that emotion, everybody's like, ha ha ha, you snowflake, and it's like, dude, what? That was the best possible entertainers in the world who did something and created something that caused you to feel a certain way. And now you're bringing your feelings into your normal session with your therapist. Of course,
And
that's
I mean,
normal.
with the Avengers stuff, I mean, it's over years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They built it up for a decade.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's nothing snowflakey about that. Like, yeah, you were affected by media. That's fine.
Yeah.
That is not weird to me.
I did see a great one about a guy who was answering, he was actually picking up his phone to the scam phone calls.
Oh, yeah.
And just answering with spoilers for Game of Thrones and Endgame. And apparently he was just having these scammers just scream at him.
Oh, no.
Oh, that is hilarious.
That is really good vengeance. I like that a lot. Anyway.
I did see, there was something else I saw in the interwebs as well with, it was a substitute teacher that anytime the kids were talking in class, he would write a spoiler
Oh
up
my
on the
gosh!
chalkboard.
That'll get you fired. That kind of stuff gets your car keyed. Well, anyway, speaking of spoilers and things that have happened in the past, by the time people hear this, this is they're going to be hearing this at almost the end of May, and so it's going to air officially out into the big wide world May 23rd. And we have done a lot of bonus content in May. As we've had our Kickstarter running in the background, we have tried to essentially audition and try to teach, you know, okay, this is what it would look like, you know, if our Kickstarter did get funded, you know, we would do double the work and a lot of new creative stuff that we've tried to do. And we've had a lot of cool stuff happen in May.
We have.
So we should probably take a second to reflect on a lot of the content. I loved your interview with Junior.
Yeah.
Guy who's really in recovery. He's in Narcotics Anonymous. He's a professional you and I have worked with a ton. And getting to listen to you guys, you know, chew it up and just talk about life, that dude is awesome, man.
He is,
He's
yeah.
so much fun to listen to. And even as I was listening to it, I knew there was no way he was sitting down when he was talking to you.
No, of course not.
There's no way.
He doesn't.
He doesn't sit.
He kind of stands up. He walks around the room. He cannot sit still.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really good interview. And he's an easy one to interview. Because all you really have to do is just give him a microphone.
He's like
and
Robin
just
Williams.
go. Yeah.
Just give him something to launch off of, and he's going to go into Preacher for 20 minutes and just have fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, though, because I was actually going to ask what it was like for you to hear the ends of my sentences. What was that like?
Yeah, you talk a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. So, you know, all these years I just didn't think you had complete thoughts.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was really exciting to hear the But no, that was a great episode, man. And it's been getting a lot of positive feedback. I figured, real life person in recovery.
Right. And I figured a lot of people would enjoy that, to hear that perspective, because it's something that a lot of people aren't really familiar with. And I think a lot of people have questions, like they just don't understand. But to actually be able to hear him kind of talk about his lowest points, like homelessness in Florida, you know, literally eating out of dumpsters, living in the park, you know, all of this stuff. And then how he was able to get from there to where he is today.
Yeah, right. He's a leader
amazing.
in the addiction industry.
Right.
Well-known guy.
Right.
Huge speaker. It's incredible. And it really went with our mission in May, which was, hey, to raise mental health awareness. Substance abuse is part of mental health. and hearing from real people. Like this month we tried to make sure people that live with some kind of mental health condition or have experienced it are heard. And so you brought Junior to the front. In the last episode, we had David Vialon.
Right.
And he talked about suicide and being suicidal at one point and being extremely depressed, among other things. And that gave us a chance to unpack that. This month we've heard from a therapist who specializes in transgender issues. And that was awesome. That was Dr. Sarah Steelman. We got to hear from Hema Andaya, who specializes in personality disorders, and we got to hear a lot about that and how she kind of susses out the details and treats that and teaches people to kind of cope with it. It's been a really active month, man. We've done a lot of extra content.
Yep. You did your interview with...
Andrew Torres. Dude... I fanboyed the hell out. That was so exciting for me. So that's aired by the time people hear this. And basically,
I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh my God, I had so much
fun. I'm really
fun.
excited.
So Andrew Torres is a lawyer. He's in Baltimore, and he is the co-host of Opening Arguments, which is a huge show, a hit show, and it's about law, and it talks about politics. It gets into the weeds of a lot of legal things that are happening in the news. And very carefully goes through this information and shows you a lot of details you wouldn't have known, but it's still so entertaining.
And a lot of our listeners are like, so why is he talking to Jim?
Yeah.
So what was that about?
It was about the Goldwater rule.
A lot of the audio engineers in the room were thinking that too.
In fact, 100% in our most recent poll. So the crossover that we landed on that we wanted to talk about for Mental Health Month is the Goldwater rule, which is basically this rule that erupted out of a presidential election starring Barry Goldwater, who lost to Lyndon Johnson. And Barry Goldwater was the conservative Republican who was running. And basically this tabloid came out, or this magazine called Fact, and it polled psychiatrists. And it ran this headline that said 1,000 psychiatrists declare that Barry Goldwater is mentally unfit, psychologically unfit to be president. And so this hit piece went out. Now, Goldwater lost. He's probably going to lose anyway. But in the aftermath, Goldwater sued that magazine for libel and won in a very famous court case called Ginsburg versus Goldwater, or Goldwater versus Ginsburg. So he won, and in the aftermath of that, the psychological community put out an ethics principle that is now unofficially referred to as the Goldwater rule, which says anybody who has the power to diagnose and treat should not ever diagnose a public figure or somebody you have not personally assessed, because that could be misused and could become a very dangerous thing.
Which to me seems like a great rule.
It is a pretty damn good rule.
Yeah.
And up until recently, most of us kind of go with it and it's fine. And then Trump happened. Yeah. And so in the aftermath of President Trump, who obviously he has a big personality, he's done some huge things, a lot of things that people might describe as erratic. There's been conversations about, does he sometimes forget things and have an inability to follow conversations? And so a lot of people started saying, hey, can we get mental health people to sort of chime in here and tell us? And Dr. Bandy X. Lee and a whole group of different disciplined mental health professionals wrote a book called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, in which they did basically attempt to assess him and make statements about him. And so I've taken a strong stance against that. I think that it's extremely dangerous. And Andrew Torres, host of Opening Arguments, he takes a strong stance for it. And he feels as a lawyer that it's in the best interest of the public that, you and I be willing to diagnose people like Donald Trump and be able to talk about it. So we debated it in the episode and ultimately did reach a conclusion in which one of us won. So one of us persuaded the other one and declared the other the champion.
You know what?
Very exciting.
Nick and I have a theory.
I do. I'll go first.
Go ahead.
My theory is that Jim wouldn't have brought it up if he didn't win.
Oh, I would own it. I would own it. I'd own it. Jim has an entire segment of the show called Apologies. Nick doesn't. Nick can't own things.
Jim's apology section is, shall we say, less than serious.
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you cheapen my sincerity and penance? But is a very fun episode. So I geeked out because I absolutely love that show. And it was very much for me. It was probably similar to your experience. First time you met the ICS guys, you've been listening to them for years, and then all of a sudden you meet them in real life, and you have that visceral, hearing a voice come out of a head that you've only heard in headphones, and you're looking at the face as they're talking to you. We talked through Skype, and so that's how it was for me. It was oh my gosh,
So you meet them, and then you're so disappointed.
Disappointed, yeah.
exactly like this experience.
And you meet them, and like you go home and you burn all of your art, and you just play Sounds of Silence as you sit outside, and that's what happened. So
cool.
Hell of a good time.
We've had a really good. We've had a busy month.
Busy month. Yeah, lots of cool content has gone up.
Yeah, I still have a couple interviews I have to do yet.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna hopefully get those done and get them out before the end of May. It's gonna be tight, so maybe one of them might actually roll into June, but we'll have to see. But yeah, it's been exhausting and but fun.
It's been an awesome time. And so it's given us a chance this May to bring new voices to our conversation, to expand it. And we want to continue that. You know, we're still in May. It's still Mental Health Month. And so we've had folks that have been sending in clips and videos of telling us about their own mental health. And one of our favorite people, Frozen 49th Scoop, who actually joined us on stage at Scoopfest Live and talked about a fear of fire and talked about some of her own mental health stuff. She's always been a huge advocate of everything that we do. And she's also been really open about her own mental health journey. And so she actually sent us a video kind of discussing a little bit of her experience. It was unscripted. It was just sort of an honest take in an effort to sort of just tell the general public, hey, here's me, and here's what I live with a little bit. We sampled that because it was too long to play in its entirety, so we did sample it. But we definitely want to play that and kind of react to some of her honest stuff and some of the story that she told.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, here goes. Someone's probably never going to see this, but this is what it's like in my head. I'm moving fast. I'm hypomanic. And it's a form of bipolar. I have many thoughts going on all at once, and I'm good at multitasking, and I'm good at prioritizing. There are some times when I go a little too fast, but in the years that I have learned that I can't take medications due to the fact that they usually make me sick, and I've ended up in the hospital twice, I've learned to have to slow down. In that time, I've also learned my triggers, what warns me. Chronic nightmares, lack of hunger, almost like turning off if I lose any emotional attachment. Almost like if someone dies, you know, you just kind of lose it and you just don't care. It's very similar to that. It's not that I'm being dramatic. It's not that I'm trying to sound like it's an excuse. I've spent a very long time trying to meditate and focus and learn that, okay, it's okay. It's okay to have a bad day. Even if you're not bipolar, even if you're not ADD or anything, PSTD, it doesn't matter. Everybody can have a bad day. Mine show themselves. I have hard time focusing, and for me that's really strange because I'm constantly thinking. It's what makes me good at supplies and running different operations. It's just how I am. It makes me good at what I do. Everything I've ever done that is a multitask attention issue or job, I've been able to do. And I've never had any major complaints other than, okay, she talks a lot. Duh. And sometimes she seems scatterbrained. But when it comes down to little details, they're always fulfilled. And I'm better at identifying needs of wherever I am or whatever I'm doing. But then sometimes I just don't care. I don't. I can't explain it other than I'm just having a bad day. I'm down. Thankfully, I'm blessed. Only happens about 2 to 3 times a year, only for a day or two. There are people, unfortunately, with bipolar that it lasts months, almost a year in some cases. And I'm heartbroken that there are people out there like that because I only have a day. You know, I only have that one time where I just don't care. And these poor people, you know, they go through their life, they can't sit down because they're so manic. I do have that problem, but not to a disability level. I can't work. It is a disability, and I have to remind myself of that many times. It's something that I have to fight, and it's something that I have to keep on going with.
In this tape, and the rest of it, she did continue. She told some stories and kind of explained. She talks about having a support animal and what a difference that's made for her, which I actually really wanted to include, but I wanted to keep this clip to sample it to this conversation about bipolar. And
Right.
so one of the things I love about this is that she's honest about it and says, listen, I have bipolar. You're hearing the voice of somebody who has this. And it's a word that gets thrown around
Right.
all the time. People describe the weather as bipolar, which really pisses me off, or the stock market as bipolar, and people, I think, generally have a misunderstanding about what it is. And for her to live into that and say, look at me, I am bipolar. I am employed. I am able to do a lot of things. Part of, and we've talked about this on the show before, Nick, is that some folks will tell you this is a blessing and a curse, right? Like we've had people talk about having autism spectrum and how it's a gift in some ways. It gives them an ability to do something that other people can't. And she reflects on that too and says, I have an energy level that I can summon to do things that is incredible.
Right.
And she also talks a little bit about what it means to be hypomanic and how for her she cycles a little bit infrequently. Other people cycle rapidly, but she cycles in and out of it infrequently, and how, it is a burden when it happens, but that she's learned to overcome it.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways here too with this that I got from what she was saying is that even with the misunderstanding of what bipolar is, even by having that definition, it changes depending on the person.
Yes.
So you can't say this
Hell, we have two
individual-
types of bipolar.
Right.
Just because it's so hard to
we can't
define.
say that this one individual with bipolar has the same symptoms and is going
Right.
to react the same way that this other individual. So
Exactly.
she talks about hers being intense, but not as frequent. I mean, when it hits her. She also talks about how she reacts to medications. Unfortunately,
Yes.
she's one of the ones that she just doesn't have a good reaction to medication. There are
Right.
other people that medication becomes the primary
Right.
method for which to treat it because it becomes very effective.
Yes.
For her, it doesn't. And she even goes into, later on in this recording, kind of talking about strategies that she's put into place to manage to the best of her ability without medication.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's really important is, we're not talking about, I don't think she doesn't talk at all in that video about her hope in getting rid of it.
No.
It's making it manageable.
Yes.
Which I think is really important. And when people take that approach in dealing with mental health, or the same way when we talk about addiction,
Right.
not being able to say like, I'm just going to go from being an addict to not being an addict, or I'm going to go from having, severe generalized anxiety to
Not
no
having it.
generalized anxiety.
Right.
It's I'm going to find a way to manage so that I still
Yes.
have this thing with me, but
Yes.
it doesn't control me. I control it.
Yes, and that mental shift of seeing mental health things as almost like diabetes or some other chronic kind of thing. Whereas depression and anxiety can be episodic, that is true, and they can be something that existed discretely in a period of time, you're always susceptible to experiencing something like that again, and so you approach it with that greater awareness. Bipolar disorder, you are not getting rid of. There is not like a candy we can give you and then you're never going to have it again. A lot of people do medicate, things like Saffris, mood stabilizers, sometimes antipsychotics, because psychotic symptoms can sometimes feature in bipolar. There is medication that can be part of the solution, but it's also a lot of therapeutic work goes into this too. And that ultimately lands on a place of being managed, where you've got this, it's no longer causing destructive cycles in your life, knowing your body, knowing your mind. Bipolar is also, and let's pause real quick, pit stop. Here's what bipolar is, audience. Bipolar is not emotional swings.
Right.
A lot of people think it's, well, gee, my girlfriend was really nice to me on Saturday and extremely mean to me on Sunday. She's bipolar. That is not what bipolar is.
If that was the case, we would all have it.
We'd all have bipolar.
There wouldn't be a name for it.
Yeah, it's called humanity. Like we all just have emotional swings, right?
Right.
And if a person is emotionally volatile, that can be dysfunctional. They can have emotional volatility to the point where it's causing clinically significant amounts of distress. However, you're looking at the wrong word if you're using bipolar to describe that. And that's one of the most common mistakes I see in therapy is I see folks coming in saying, I'm here because I think I'm bipolar, and then they describe mood fluctuation. And that's not what bipolar is. Bipolar is when you transition from mental states, from depression to hypo or mania.
Right.
And she talks in the video about being hypomanic, which means slightly beneath full mania. Mania is almost a psychotic condition. It is grandiose amounts of energy, elevated states, constant euphoria. It's the person who thinks it's a good idea to mow the lawn at 2 a.m. or who'll bet their entire house in a casino because they can't possibly lose. They're not out of their mind, but they damn near seem like it.
Right.
And they just cannot be convinced to tone it down. They have unlimited amounts of energy. It's like they did meth. It's like a natural meth. And that's essentially what mania is. It is illogical, it is emotional as well, but it is a state of the mind. So when she talks about that, medication is going to be really common in the way people treat it, and this is something you and I have seen in folks that we've worked with who did have bipolar disorder. It is one of the only disorders I have seen in which sometimes people don't want to take their medicine because they miss the symptoms. They miss the mania, because mania or hypomania is also euphoric.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of self-discipline to feel that coming and to take your medicine anyway or to do the skills necessary to avoid it.
Yeah.
Or to dial it in. It takes a lot of work to
people,
try to work on that long term.
Yeah, that's usually when they stop taking their meds.
Is this primarily a chemical issue?
It is.
Okay.
Bipolar is definitely a chemical imbalance.
Always or mostly or what?
In order to, there's not a blood test for it, but I would say, in my experience, 100% of the time, in order to meet the symptoms of bipolar disorder, it requires a biochemical imbalance in order to have it. Yeah.
Right. So it's not necessarily something that one can develop through
You
a
cannot
terrible
induce
childhood.
it. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Now, it may correlate. There
Right.
may be correlation where during puberty and during childhood you underwent certain psychic experiences that ultimately did result in a brain that could meet the conditions for bipolar disorder. That is possible, but no, it does not have that direct link. Whereas PTSD,
Right.
you have no biochemical signature that made that happen.
Well, and even, using PTSD as an example, even with PTSD, there's genetic vulnerability.
Yes.
But it's not the same as like saying that there's something chemically wrong with
Correct.
the brain.
Correct.
It's
But there
more
is a
environmental
correlation,
focused.
and there
Right.
is a correlation between childhood trauma and adolescent trauma and the development of bipolar disorders. That there is a correlation. And so it's one of those mixed ones where it definitely has that medical feel to it. And more often than not, if somebody comes in and I'm the first stop on their journey to recovery from bipolar disorder, I am always going to insist on a psychiatric consult, whereas I won't do that necessarily for other things.
Right. And a big part of that, too, correct me if I'm wrong, is just the fact that the strong correlation then with also suicide ideology.
Yes, very dangerous condition to have because
Right.
we think about the mania side of it, and that's when people might have promiscuous sex, they may gamble, they may use drugs and alcohol, they may do hugely financially irrational things, they may commit crime, they may have psychotic features where they're seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there, they may have extreme paranoia, they just are going to crash their life during a hypomanic or manic episode. But in depression, their life is in danger because of that suicidal ideation and because of the potential that they'll give up and they'll throw it all away when they will cycle out of it. But we've got to get them to that place. And I'm glad I guess I accidentally mentioned meth. It also extremely common for bipolar people is to abuse substances because
Right.
they're going to self-medicate.
Right, exactly. That's something we see quite often.
It's the only relief they ever experience is when they medicate.
And then that becomes difficult then when you get that individual into recovery.
Yes.
Because now it's like they self-medicate for a reason because it works.
Yes.
And then, but it works, but then it causes other problems.
Yes.
Right. So then now you have to take the one coping skill that they have found that has been effective in
Right.
treating this condition and you take it away.
And you usually have to bring them in with psychiatric medicines
Right.
and try to work on it all at the same time. Plus you're trying to treat the addiction part of it.
Right.
Plus bipolar also has impulse disorder components, right?
Yes.
And so that is a very hard situation to try to treat when it's co-occurring.
Yeah.
And I would say almost 100% of the time that I've experienced bipolar disorder, they have had a history of substance abuse.
And a big part of treating this is getting the individual to be able to recognize where they are in that cycle. And kind of a big part of it is education.
Yes.
And that's a really...
self-monitoring.
Yeah, it's a difficult
Huge.
thing for them to be able to identify that themselves. They have to really train themselves how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, she goes into detail talking in later about her therapy dog.
Yes.
And how she uses the dog as a way, as kind of a mirror, a reflection of where she's at.
Because the dog can sense her emotion.
So if the dog is really hyper and really excited, she knows the dog is feeding off of my energy.
Yep.
Therefore, the dog is an
know.
indicator.
Yes,
to where
it's an
she's
indicator light. And so, Frozen 49th, you have been such an important part of our work. I mean, even meeting us in person at Scoop Fest and being one of the first people up on that stage to talk about your real life experience, to send us this video, you are one of the faces of mental health. And I love that because you've also written in the show before and told us about your profession and about your successes there and how you've grown. And I think it's important that all the listeners understand that when you hear bipolar disorder, you hear it used as a slur, and it's used as weaponized words to try to talk about, love lives and things like that and emotions. I want you to now forever think of the voice you heard at the beginning of the show, that you heard Frozen 49th talking about her truth, and you heard the emotion well up in her voice as she started to almost cry, thinking about people who suffer with the same conditions for even longer than she does, and how unbearable that sounded in her voice. And I want you to think about that from now on. Don't use bipolar as a slur. Don't use it casually. Look up the real symptoms, understand it, and remember that these are human beings who can overcome their conditions, go on to live extremely productive lives, and they have to manage this ongoing. It doesn't just go away. It's something they live with, and they overcome it. And I love that bravery, and I love that voice.
Absolutely. Thanks for writing in, or sending in a recording.
Yeah.
If you need a slur, there are lots of slurs out there.
There's plenty of slurs.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great slurs.
Write into Jim.
Yeah.
Jim has the best slurs.
The ones he says off air. Did you hear the bit where Jacob during the couples counseling accused me of saying N-word rage?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
N-word.
Yeah, he's ruined it for me.
I didn't accuse you of it. I pointed out that you said
I can't talk about rage anymore in real work without laughing, which is a terrible reaction
It actually,
when we're talking about rage.
Which is what I said I was doing at the time.
He's ruined it.
It took me a minute
to realize where he was going with it.
Yeah, because N-word is like, I didn't hear him say it. But then N-word,
you realize.
INWARD.
Yeah, inward rage.
Got it.
Yeah, he roasted me. Yeah. So now he's ruined my ability. I can't treat conditions now. Thanks, Jacob. And thanks, Frozen 49.
No problem.
We appreciate you so much.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we discuss being trans in Trumpland. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Chairman of the Board, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, also known as the Chairman. Robert was a Chinese communist revolutionary who became the founding father of the People's Republic of China, which he ruled as the chairman of the Communist Party of China from its establishment in 1949 until his death in 1976. His theories, military strategies, and political policies are collectively known as Maoism. If you would like to join Chairman Robert Mint and make the show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about being trans in Trumpland.
Hey guys, I just found myself crying in a McDonald's bathroom just off I-80 in rural Iowa and figured it's probably past time for me to talk to somebody. I'm at work 24/7 for over 300 days a year, and my days off are somewhat random. I drive a tractor trailer for a living. This makes keeping appointments rather difficult, so y'all will have to suffice for now. Thank you, by the way. The podcast has been helping a lot. Bullet point in there, don't forget about online therapy. That's a thing. You could always take advantage of that, too, and just schedule phone sessions. But anyway, back to the letter. I came out as trans in 2010 while I was a junior in college. I'd known I was trans since I was a middle schooler, But 2 years into the Obama administration was the first time in my adult life that I felt it was safe to transition. I was, at the time, rather libertarian. So much of my friend group leaned toward the conservative end of the political spectrum. The leave me the fuck alone philosophy was rather appealing to my young trans adult self. At the time, it kind of felt like to me that even conservative folks were coming to grips with LGBT rights just being something they had to live with, and nobody seemed to give a crap that over a couple of months I gradually changed from depressed boy to happy lesbian. Fast forward to now. Friends I thought for a decade to not have a bigoted bone in their body are now defending the blatantly transphobic policies of the Trump administration to a point where I feel I have to cut myself off from them entirely. I suspect their opinions on the matter changed only due to the polarizing nature of the team sport that is our political system. But that doesn't make it hurt any less to see people that I once called friends referring to trans folks as mentally unwell and unfit for the military, or even basic social acceptance. It hurts a lot. After 2 years of living under the Trump administration, unfiltered social media has turned into a daily heartbreaking IV drip of despair, as my very right to existence as a trans person has become a political opinion that half the country seems to disagree with. I try my hardest to filter out the voices of people that espouse these opinions, but cutting myself off from the people that were once as close to me as my own family over something they see as just politics doesn't feel like the right answer either. This constant onslaught of these negative feelings is starting to get to me. I've had panic attacks in public restrooms when large groups of cisgender, aka not trans people, enter the room while I'm in a stall, and often neglect to properly take care of myself as I dip back into the depression I thought I'd defeated a decade ago. The constant solitude of my job doesn't help either. Even though I'm surrounded by other people, anytime I stop for food or fuel, attempting to socialize with other truck drivers often just exposes me to the same bigotry with some added sexism on top, and I'm trying to run away from all of it. I found myself spending far too much time on Twitter, among a more carefully curated social group mostly consisting of other trans people. This is a great source of positive interaction and beneficial socializing that I can't seem to get anywhere else, but that sometimes causes unhealthy behaviors of its own, taking up large amounts of the time I don't spend driving that should probably be used for self-care like laundry, showering, and most often sleep. I'm technically homeless. After my hometown made it illegal for me to park my tractor in my neighborhood, I put my belongings in storage and just get a hotel room now and then whenever I need downtime. I've been trying to switch divisions at my company to limit my operating area to just one region so I can take more time off and begin putting down roots in a new city, but so far I've been unsuccessful. So here I sit in my truck at the Stewart McDonald's, having just had a good cry on the crapper after quietly leaving a Facebook group where coworkers were sharing homophobic jokes. Do you have any advice you can share with someone that has, through the politicization of my right to exist and over-dedication to a particularly solitary job, become entirely unmoored from society except via social media sites that are themselves slowly destroying my life? How do I even begin to deal with the constant reminder that half of the country seems to hate me? Hug your dogs if you have any for me. Ellie O'Dare.
Well, thank you for writing in. This is a difficult letter to.
It's a hard one to read,
and I will definitely pass on your hugs to Layla and Penny Lane.
Yeah,
my dogs,
and Pumpkin shall receive a hug as well. She's my Chihuahua.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, the whole thing with you had a group of friends that you believed were really supportive.
Yes,
and through everything that's going on in politics today, you've got this individual that takes, the presidency, and now it just seems like any idea that you ever thought that was absolutely crazy and bigoted that you just kept to yourself, now all of a sudden you've got a right to.
Oh yeah,
you just express it and you feel comfortable expressing it.
And by you don't mean the writer.
No. Yeah. I mean those individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, when the leader of the country is expressing similar beliefs, then people like, oh, this is cool now.
Right. You can say whatever you
I
want.
can say this. And
no consequences.
Yeah, that's very difficult.
How much of this too is just people that supported Donald Trump in his run up to the presidency and everything else? Because I see this a lot, that it's people who supported him in his run and his campaign and everything else, that now that he's in and now that these things that people absolutely said during the campaign would happen are happening. But they feel so defensive, and it's that whole thing. I can't say that I was wrong when I supported him before, so now I have to justify it to make myself not completely wrong.
Ellie talked about that. It talked about the team sport, how politics has become a team sport. Like,
now, some people are just being assholes.
Yeah,
some people are just being assholes. I'm not talking about those people.
Yeah,
they're all being assholes.
Are you saying kind of like in poker, you're just pot committed?
Yeah, I think so.
You've put too much into this.
I think there's a percentage of these people that are just pot committed.
I think it's hard.
I think so.
I think that's absolutely true, Jacob, because I've seen that with a lot of relationships in my life.
And it's not that they're not being assholes.
Yeah.
They're being assholes.
They're taking it to a new level, but a lot of times they'll go, "Oh, the trans ban."
And then
you know what?
They justify.
Yeah. Trump's probably right. I'm all in on Trump, and it's like, guys, we got to be able to suss out the details here. We got to be able to say, hey, listen, I know you're going to vote for him again. I know you generally agree, but there's also got to be some things that you pump the brakes on, right? That he can be Trump and you can be John, right? And you can have different opinion than the guy, right? Like that's got to be okay.
It's like, I voted for Barack Obama when he was running. There are many things that I disagree with him completely on.
And can discuss those at length. And it doesn't surrender your vote. It's not like the other person then goes, oh, okay, great. Now we can
at the time I thought he was the best candidate running.
Sure.
So that's who I voted for. That does not mean that I agreed with him on everything.
Whereas in the Trump era, and I think and it was true in the Obama era too, but for Donald Trump, he put out the trans ban, and he's been he's had some really negative, colorful language to talk about. And I think, as you said, Nick, it's allowed a lot of people who already had really views that you didn't say in polite company. Those guys dropped the act and started coming out with it. And then now, whenever the news comes out and goes, hey, the trans ban, all of a sudden it's 1986 again, and people just go, yeah, those people shouldn't be in here anyway. And here's Ellie just like, dude, 3 years ago, we were cool.
Right.
You could get along with me. You never questioned my right to exist.
And I guess the question, kind of where my mind's at, whereas that there are different theories. So one theory being that they had these beliefs all along, and then now they're able to express them. Or as Jacob was saying, maybe they didn't have these beliefs, but they've committed so heavily into this one individual that now they feel like they have to go along with it.
They don't question them, or they don't challenge those things. Yeah.
In either case, I think ultimately it comes back to how you feel, Ellie, and how this makes you feel, and what it is that you want to do about that, and how you want to filter that out. Because, there's at the end of the day, to cut ties with these individuals,
right?
It doesn't take away from what they were at the time,
right?
And this is just my own philosophy. So for example, there's a guy that I know that I went to graduate school with. And, when you're in graduate school, we had a class of 10 people.
Sure.
We got really close to each other, right? And he was really cool. Everything was great, and had a lot of respect for him. But then since we've graduated, he got really into this far right political movement. And we were friends on Facebook for a long time. And it got to a point where I hated going on Facebook and seeing anything he posted, because it would just irritate me. Man, what happened to you?
But, and that was already powerful, and that only had to do with politics.
Exactly.
You weren't having your existence questioned.
Exactly, and it wasn't an attack on me personally.
Right.
If I ran into him at the bar, we could still hang out, we could still talk, and everything would be good. But ultimately, it just got to a point where you know what? This does not bring me joy to see this, so I'm going to cut this out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take away from the individual that he is, or the person who he was at that time. Hey, we got along great, and he was very influential. He was a positive influence in my life at that time. But that doesn't mean that he's still a positive influence right now.
Yeah.
So I just kind of had to make that decision. Okay, you served your purpose.
And now you don't have one.
As terrible as that sounds. But now I'm going a different direction, so we're parting ways.
So, Ellie, I think that you can definitely follow to that point. And it sounds like to some extent you have been. And one of the things I think we have to point out, and I'm so glad that you wrote in, I got the chance to discuss this a little bit with Dr. Sarah Steelman, who really illuminated a lot of the challenges that people go through during transition. It is an extremely isolating experience because most of us do not wake up every day and think about our gender as an identity or as a social group.
Right.
But it absolutely is. And whenever you're transitioning between two different genders, okay, so you're not accepted by women anymore. You're not accepted by men. If you're a lesbian, you're not accepted by straight people. And so, like, you have all of these, like, you're just inherently seen with suspicion. Friends and family you grew up with, a lot of times you have to depart from because they know you one way and they're not going to honor or respect your new identity. It is an extremely isolating situation anyway. And I'm of the belief that anybody who is going through that kind of experience probably needs to develop, at least in this era, a long-term relationship with a support group or with a therapist in their life, not because there's something broken about you, and it has nothing to do with the specific nature of being trans. It is the environment of a world that you were born into that exists around you in this era that you need to adapt to. And so, Ellie, when I hear you talking about your willingness to the top of the letter, you said, I think it's finally time. I think I finally need to do something about this. And taking that first step and writing into the show really, Ellie, means so much to me because that is exactly why we started this show.
Right.
Is people who may not have ever bumped into a therapist because of their line of work or because of what's going on, they never had the opportunity, and now because of this show, they can go, well, you know what, I can actually write in and I can have contact and maybe get some feedback. And so that's the first step of a trail of steps that I want you to take that ultimately lands you in a relationship with a therapist using online therapy, BetterHelp, e-therapy. There's a lot of different, groups out there. Shop, find one, pick a therapist that works for you, or wherever you call home, develop a relationship with a therapist. I do phone counseling, and I have lots of patients that travel all the time. And you know what? That's fine for me. Like, they are a resident of my state, and I will treat them. And you know what? I'm not going to interrupt their care because they happen to be doing business on the road, and that's fine. And most therapists are going to be fine with that. Sometimes they'll say, I can't treat you if you're not in the state. Just don't tell them that you've left the state. Just tell them, hey, I'm downtown. Like, how are you? Weather's great. Great. Let's talk about my life. And you can put in a phone, your Bluetooth in your head, and you can be having an hour-long session, multiple times a week if needed, Ellie. But, if you don't make the time for this, then this is going to destroy you. And you're going through a lot. There was so much pain in that letter. You cannot go through this alone.
Yeah. And the therapy, I think, is going to be one part of it.
Yes.
Finding, as you said, some kind of support group is going to be
she's
very
done
important.
a good job of.
Yeah,
Ellie has talked about that.
It's
and
difficult
again,
to
just
do with
quick
that
disclaimer,
job.
pronouns here, there's no self-reference in the letter that gives us a pronoun to use. So we're going with first name on this. So apologies in advance if we're screwing up pronouns.
But I think with Ellie's job, it becomes difficult.
Yeah.
With being on the road and not really having a home per se,
right?
Air quotes.
And you're driving alone.
Well, yeah, and then to try to establish a community. Like I know here in Las Vegas, there's the center.
Yeah.
So
LGBT center. Yeah.
And they've got it's just a community hangout
social
place.
groups.
You go there, they've got groups, but even when there's no groups going
Movie
on,
nights.
they've got a cafe in there. They've got all sorts of really cool stuff.
So you have an isolating job.
Yeah.
You've undergone an isolating experience in your search for authenticity, and now you're living in isolating political times.
Yeah.
And you've circled yourself with like the Twitter community, but Ellie points out this community, while nourishing and while all I've got, can become this circled wagon experience in which that has its own troubles. And so I need a richer, more diverse humanity experience during a time when humanity is extremely untrustworthy. And, one piece of advice that I would generally speak of, how do we change this? We change this by being loud about it. Right. We change this by the same way Frozen 49th is changing bipolar disorder, the same way that David Violon is changing suicidal depression, the same way that Junior is changing addiction to drugs and alcohol. We change it by introducing ourselves to the world. Change the same way that I change anxiety, by introducing ourselves to the world and unashamedly telling people this is who I am. I am not a caricature. I am not a political talking point. I'm a real human being. And even as I say that, though, it's too great a burden to ask Ellie to bear.
Right.
It's something we as a world have to do. We as a community have to do. And each one's got to stand up for each other. And Ellie, when it comes to you, I don't put that burden on you, that the future of our society does not hang in the balance on your courage to go out and yell at people. That is not how it works. Right now, I'm worried about you. And the fact that you are pulled over in a McDonald's parking lot, drenched in tears, tells me that right now you're at a place of being overwhelmed. You're at a place of feeling completely alone, isolated, vulnerable, fearful, having panic whenever you're in a restroom because you feel like, oh my gosh, even though I don't have any reason to think these people are going to hurt me, I'm feeling completely out of my element. I'm feeling unsafe. Ellie, there's a lot of things here that tell me that this is a time in your life. It won't be forever, but this is a time in your life when we should not be the last professionals that you reach out to. I'm glad we're the first, but I think I want to challenge you to take another step forward. I don't expect you to solve this, but I do expect you to do the next right thing when it comes to your own mental health. And that's something in the letter you talk about and you own, and I love it. You own it honestly. You haven't done enough yet. It's time to do more.
Yeah. I think, one of her, the last question in Ellie's letter, how do I begin to deal with the constant reminder that half of the country seems to hate people like me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tough one. Immediately in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, if half of the country hates people like you, then that means that half of the country loves people like you.
There you go.
And is in support of people like you.
Yeah.
I think the biggest struggle then is just accessing that half.
Right.
I think that is the challenge that a lot of folks get into, especially Ellie, where you've got a job that really keeps you isolated, and perhaps the only half that you ever run into is that one half.
Yeah.
And
you start driving through some blue
right.
states, Ellie. Take a route that's going like up and down the West Coast. You'll be fine. Then you'll realize nobody cares. Like everybody's over it. But, also to that point, you've heard us talk about on the show, Ellie, but feelings are not facts. And the perception that half of the United States hates you, hey, that's inaccurate. That's not accurate. It is true that right now it is consequence-free to bash people like you, and that there are some who are using that to be louder than everybody else. But the silent, vast majority of our country does not care. And if you look into polling results, millennials, who are now fast becoming the deciding votes of our nation and the caretakers of our nation, do not care. It is not something that matters to them. They see you as an authentic human being. Nick and I see you as an authentic human being. You know that the THERAPALs and the THERAPOD see you as an authentic human being with nothing to apologize for and nothing to be ashamed of. And, the followers of that dessert-themed podcast, whatever the hell those guys are called, I know that they also do.
Ellie's a scoop as well.
Oh,
and Ellie's,
I will be damned.
Ellie's wonderful. I love Ellie, and I'm glad that Ellie's reaching out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, remember your people here.
And that you brought up a good point. Like when you look at the younger generation that will be the influencers, you're seeing a swing in the perception of this. And in that case, Ellie is kind of out in the front. Ellie is kind of a pioneer in this area. She's one of the ones that's going to be like, I was able to do this at a time when it wasn't popular.
Right.
When it was very difficult.
Right. Absolutely. And it may feel like you're against the wind on this one, and that is absolutely true. We're not here to minimize it. We're here to, validate it. And also, that is not the only thing that is true. We live in a complicated world, and there's a lot more of us than there are of them. Yep. And you'll see that soon enough. We outnumber them. Yep. And the dinosaurs will die.
Oh, I love it. I have relatives, young nieces and whatnot, that are, the young millennial generation or whatever the hell that generation is called now. I can't keep up with anything. But are extremely Christian, Bible thumping teenagers.
Oh, wow.
And as we all know, like teenagers take everything to that
super
nth
literal.
degree. And so
take it way too far.
And still do not care at all.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's not even an issue.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, everybody in the room knows that, I do come from a faith fellowship. And, even in Christianity, there's a lot of discussion inside of the camp about how fast it's changing. It's scaring the hell out of the old schoolers because, the younger Christians are, writing it right in there. We're totally open, cool with, anybody who's gay, straight, lesbian, queer, doesn't matter. Come one, come all. We don't see ourselves as needing to distinguish any of that. And it's that's actually the fastest growing area of Christianity. Mm-hmm. There's a really neat guy named Rich Mullins in San Diego. He has a church called, I think it's called Open Gathering, or no, Mission Church. And oh my gosh, he's gay. He's the most fun dude you'll ever listen to. I walked with him on a beach in San Diego once and just listened to this dude. I thought, man, I could listen to this dude for hours. And just, he loves humans and, no shame in his game. So the world's changing, Ellie. It's changing fast. And you just hang on because change is happening. You got to trust in that.
Yeah, I think just hanging on, staying your course, continue to be you, and the world will catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question.
Ellie, do what Jim's saying. Take care of yourself. And I'm glad to hear that you are.
Yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll go into apologies and announcements. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Kayla Lansbury. Posthumously known as the unsinkable Kayla Lansbury, she was an American socialite and philanthropist. She is best remembered for encouraging the crew of Lifeboat Number 6 to return to the debris field of the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic to look for survivors. During her lifetime, her friends called her Maggie, but even by her death, obituaries referred to her as the unsinkable Mrs. Lansbury. The reference was further reinforced in a 1960 Broadway musical based on her life and its 1964 film adaptation, which were both entitled The Unsinkable Kayla Lansbury. If you'd like to join the Unsinkable Lansbury and make this show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Okay, we're back, and it's time for announcements and apologies.
So, May, as you may have heard, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's been a hell of a month.
As you may have heard.
May, as you may have heard.
But
the month of May the 4th be with you. The month of Cinco de Mayo is also the month of mental health. And so our Kickstarter is only alive for one more week. And as you probably already know, Kickstarters are all or nothing financial campaigns. So if by May 31st we have not raised all of our funds, they all go back to all the people that pledged them and we get nothing, and that's okay if that happens. But if you would like to help us meet the goal, then go ahead into the link provided in the description of this episode and paste it into your social media. Just hold it down and select copy and paste it into your social media and let people know, hey, it's Mental Health Month. Here's a show that really makes a difference, and help us do more of it as we've tried to audition in May to do. And so if you'd like to help for that, you can. Other announcements, Book Club is back, baby.
Book Club is back. Yes, we need to record a few more episodes, but we are reviewing the book Maybe You Should Talk to Somebody by Lori Gottlieb.
The great Lori Gottlieb.
Yep. And
episodes air on Mondays, and so by the time you hear this, you will have heard the episode in which we discuss at length Lori's therapist, Wendell, and that was a very interesting thing. I actually sent that to her. I just emailed her that cut and was like, hey, if you want to know what other therapists thought of Wendell.
Why would you do that?
That's how I get people on the show, Nick. Don't question it. I get results. Lori came on the show.
Yes.
And then I got Andrew Torres. So, don't question it. It works.
All right.
So I have some apologies this week. A couple of things that just need to be made right.
Mainly to Lori and Andrew.
Mainly to everybody I've mentioned by name. Dear Nick Tangeman, co-host of Pod Therapy.
I'm listening.
I'm sorry that I keep screenshotting our conversations and posting them out of context to imply that we have a sexual relationship. Our intimacy is nobody else's business, and I think our women are starting to catch on.
That is a terrible apology.
Namaste. Dear my wife, Janelle, I'm sorry that I refused to take you out to dinner because I, quote, don't date married women. I'll take you out as long as we each pay for our own. Sticking to it, man, because I'm a gentleman. Dear IHOP, I'm sorry that I turned the ultrasound picture of pancakes you posted on Mother's Day into a public service announcement for women not to consume breakfast vaginally. Gynecology is not my professional discipline, and from now on I will stay in my scope. Still feel like it was sound advice.
Yeah, I guess. I didn't see that, and I'm glad I didn't.
When I posted that, a bunch of women posted back, and they said, "You don't tell me what to do with my body."
Good for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's the spirit of it. Yeah.
And we want to thank our Patreons. We especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight and Mysterious and Shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the TheraProducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Chairman of the Board, Kayla Lansbury, David Data Scoop Vialon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dunn, and ex officio board member Ellie O'Dare.
Ellie O'Dare. If you would like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, including Book Club, you can go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and now at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangerman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Good show, everybody.
Agree to disagree.
Respectfully, no.
I didn't say respectfully.
You put words in my mouth.